But I was just traumatized. I was humiliated. I was dehumanized, all because I wanted my money that I had placed in a bank that I had been banking with at that time some 47 and a half years.
She couldn't get any satisfaction because they called the police. And when the police got there, they said somebody said to them something about a gun. So the police asked her something, they saw a gun. Miss Stevens says, I don't have a gun. I've never owned a gun. I don't believe in guns. And the police say, if you say gun one more time, we're gonna arrest you. And she said, what are you talking about guns? Who said anything about guns? And they arrest this grandmother and drag her out of that bank. During the arrest, her nose is fractured. They then take her to jail. I mean, think about your mother now. They take her to jail. Nobody's notified her family because she is resisting and protesting, saying, hold on, I didn't do anything wrong. They got my $600. And they dragging her. She said, I don't want to go to jail. I didn't do anything wrong. They throw her in jail. And they say, because she is resisting so much that they put her on suicide watch. They take off all her clothes and throw her into a jail cell naked for the night, where she's on the floor with all kind of spots and liquid on the floor, ants crawling. She's there for how long, Miss Stevens?
A whole day, but a day and a half.
A day and a half. She's in jail. Her family hasn't been notified anything.
I wasn't given a telephone call.
Wasn't given a telephone call. And this is all because Mid-Florida Credit Union did not respect her as a valued customer. We don't know why. Was it the color of her skin? Was it they didn't believe her, even though she had her receipt and the engineer for the ATM said he had her money? Why wouldn't they make this right? And then after she gets out of jail, and you're gonna hear from Ms. Stevens and Attorney Chavez, as I understand it, a bank official comes to her and apologizes. Bought her an orchid with a $300 gift card.
When was this?
The day after she gets out of jail, and said that this never should have happened. This is what they tell her. They say, we're gonna cover 1 month of your mortgage. But she had to be humiliated, her nose fractured, and in jail for over 30 hours, butt naked, for banking while black. We will not accept you doing our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers like this. If you don't respect our black mothers, you don't respect us as black customers, and you don't respect us with our black dollars, then Mid-Florida Credit Union and any other bank in America do not expect to get our business. We will not accept this. Ms. Stevens is not alone. She's standing with a whole nation of people. She went to the ATM to deposit $600 so she could make sure she could pay her mortgage that was coming up. Miss Stevens, 70 years old, went, deposited the $600 in the ATM, then saw that it wasn't showing in her account the next day. She went to the bank, told them she deposited $600 with the receipt, had her proof, because we have to have receipts, And they told her that, okay, they're working on it to come back later that afternoon. So she comes back again, and they tell her they're still working on it. Now, she saw the ATM person working on the machine. They all knew they were having problems with the ATM. And so she comes back a second time saying, hey, I really need this money. I gotta pay my mortgage. I can't be late on my mortgage. I deposited the money. I need to pay my mortgage. They tell her, well, we're working on it. Come back again. A third time. She's been responsible and awfully patient. She comes back a third time. And I think Ms. Stevens, Attorney Chavez, they told her that they acknowledged the ATM engineer had the $600 in cash. They acknowledged the problem was their problem. And she said, well, just give me my money. I gotta pay my mortgage. I put it in my account, credit my account. I gotta pay my mortgage. They don't do that. And she said, I'm not leaving here without my money. I gotta pay my mortgage. They did say this 70-year-old grandmother is so belligerent, so outrageous. This lady who's saying, I want my money, that instead of them trying to deal with her as a valued, respectable customer,
50 years.
For 50 years, she's been banking at that bank. A 50-year customer. You know, this was started as a teacher's credit union. She's a teacher. This is the person who is the ideal customer for you. 50-year customer who said, I just want my $600 that you all have told me that you have. Give me my money or credit my account. But I'm not leaving here a third time without some kind of satisfaction.
Good afternoon. This traumatic experience for me started on April 13th. And just to give you a little background of me, I'm a retired educator from Polk County Schools. I taught school. I was an assistant principal some 12 years. I was over the health curriculum for Polk County Schools for middle and high school. I'm very active in my church. I'm the immediate past president of the Polk County Retired Educators. I'm a community activist, and I care about people. I'm going to try to fill in the blanks that Attorney and Rufus left out. When I went to that ATM, Rufus and I went to the ATM together, as we normally do. I looked later at the ATM, and there were more than 8 cameras up under the shed of the ATM machine. So I knew they had captured me on one or more of those videos. And when I left, and Roosevelt said, well, Linda, go back after they open at 7 o'clock. And I went back up there and I had to talk with the cashier. I told him the story. He asked me, did I have a receipt? And I said, yes. I showed him the receipt. Finally, he says to me, I can't help you. You need to talk to my supervisor. Of course, when the supervisor came, I shared my story. I showed him the receipt. And he said to me, he said, if you look behind you, you can see the truck of the man here working on the ATM machine because something had happened with the machine. He said, you need to fill out a dispute form. I said, I'm not disputing with myself that I put the money in the machine. He said, but you need to come back. And he said, that's the way it is. That's the policy. You need to come back and fill out a dispute form, go on the inside. So after 9 o'clock, I had to go back to Mid-Florida and went and signed in and spoke with this lady. I told her my story. She said, "Can I see your receipt?" I gave her my receipt. She made a copy of it. She said, "You need to fill out a dispute form." And I told her, "I'm not disputing that I put my money." She said, "But that's the policy." So she filled out the form, and of course I signed it. And she said to me, she said, "Give us 2 hours, not more than 3 hours, and everything will be in order in your account." So I left there and I went home. I waited all day and checking my account online. There was nothing in my account that indicated they had placed that money, credited my money to my account. I waited all night. I waited till the next day. And about 10:30 that next day, I went back to the bank. And I talked with the same teller, the first teller I had spoken with, and he said, "I can't help you." And he gave me the supervisor again, and the supervisor came over, and I asked him, I said, "Where is my money?" I said, "All I want is my money. Where is it?" I said, "You told me that the ATM man was working on the machine, and you sent me in to fill out a dispute. Where?" And he turned his back and walked off. By this time, the lady in the office, who I later was identified as the head teller, came and she said, "Ma'am," she said, "I can help you in my office." And I went in the office with her and she asked me what was going on, and I shared that same story with her
Again.
and the receipt. And she said, "Well, ma'am," she said, "you know how bureaucracy is." I said, "No, I don't." I said, "I don't want anything Mid-Florida's got." I said, "I only want my money." So she said to me, she said, "I don't know what happened with yesterday," but she said, "I'm going to go ahead and just call the guy again to verify that he found your money." She called the technician. The technician told her, "Yes, I found her money in the machine. I found the $401 bills and the 1020s in the machine." Yet, when she got off of the phone, she said to me, she said, "You're still going to have to give us 2 or 3 days to get your money in your account." So when the manager had come over to the office, and she had another lady with her, and there was a police officer who came and stood directly to my right in the back of me. And she said, "You just need to go ahead and leave, and we'll get your money straightened out." And I had to tell her the story as well. And so as we were sitting there, and I said, "I just want my money. I need to pay my bill. I want my money. That's all I want." I said, "I gave you cash money." I said, "I didn't put checks in the machine. I put cash money in the machine. I just want my money." I said, "That's all I want for Mid-Florida."
Yes.
So she said, "If you don't calm down, we're going to have to call the Popo." So we were sitting there talking, and I don't know what happened, but then a few minutes later, another police officer came in the room with his hand on his gun and said, "I thought I heard her say, 'I have a gun and I'm going to shoot you.'"
Unbelievable.
I said, "What are you talking about?" And the most painful part of that was that office manager, that head teller, that other lady that was in there, the police officer standing next to me, nobody said nothing. I was the only one to speak up for myself. And all I could think when he came in with his hand on his gun was that my life was in danger. My life was being threatened.
My Lord.
But he was ready to take action because he thought. I said, "Sir, I don't have a gun." I said, "I never owned a gun." I said, "I never even shot a gun. What in the world are you talking about? Are you crazy?" And he said to me, "If you say the word gun one more time, I'm going to arrest you." And I turned around and looked up at him and I said, "Gun?" He said, "You stand up and I'm going to arrest you." And he snatched my purse. He handcuffed me behind my back as tight as he could. And it was as tight as he could because my wrist was swollen when I got the handcuffs off. And he walked me out to his car and set me in his hot car for some 15, 20 minutes. In a hot car, 11:30, 12 o'clock in the day, while he and the other officer checked me out. I heard the other officer tell him, "She's never been in trouble. She's clean," is what he said. And yet I sat there and I sat there and I sat there. Finally, the police officer comes to the car, drives me to the station, and when he gets to the car, I'm just traumatized. But at this time, I'd never been arrested. I never had any dealings with a police officer. I'd never been to court for anything outside of a speeding fine. And when we got there, he said, "You got to get out of the car." I said, "I'm not getting out of the car. You're not going to shoot me," because it was just he and I. And he's sitting there with his hand on his gun. It's his little monkey stick thing. He said, "You got to get out." I said, "No." He said, "You're going to get out of this car one way or the other." And he opened the door, and he took his hands and pulled me out of the car and dropped me on the concrete, scratching me all up and bruising me. And he pulled me halfway into the building, and then when he got a wheelchair and put me in that and took me in this room with my hands still cuffed behind my back, I was quite helpless, and took me into this little square room with my hands still cuffed behind my back. I sat in this little room with my hands cuffed, and he came and he's asked me, he said, are you going to talk to me? And I didn't say, I wouldn't say anything. I didn't want to say anything for fear that he would take it the wrong way and take my life, because nobody was there but he and I. So finally he came, and another police officer, because I had sat on the floor, I was trying to get some relief from my arms. My arms had been behind my back for a long, long time, for about an hour by now. And because I'm not as young as I used to be, my arms was really, really hurting. And so they put me in a wheelchair and rolled me out. First they picked me up, one took one arm and one took the other arm and one took my legs, and they took me outside to the car and set me in a wheelchair right beside the door. And so they both took my shoulders and threw me into the car. And when they did, because the seats are not cushioned, my head hit real hard on the seat. And that's when my nose was fractured. And I lost my shoes, my shirt flew up. And he looked at me, but he didn't say anything. So when he took me over to the sheriff department, the lady came out and she said, when she looked at me, she said, "Let me look at you and see how badly you're hurt." And so she looked at my bruises and checked me out and pulled my shirt down, and she took me in, and they took me in a little room, and they took all of my clothes, my bra, my underpants, everything, and put me on some other clothes. And then I was transported to the jail, and when I got there, they were feeding the other inmates that were there, and they said, "Well, do you want to feed her?" Because this time it was about 4 o'clock. And she said, "If she don't talk to us, she can't eat." And of course, I didn't eat.
Unbelievable.
So they asked the other lady, said, "Well, what do you want us to do with her? Where do you want us to put her?" And this big fat officer lady says, "I don't want you to put her anywhere where I can't see her." She said, "You need to call upstairs and get the supervisor down here." So it was two ladies came down, two supervisors. The first supervisor came over and looked at me, and she took her foot and kicked me just as hard as she could on the shin of my legs. Then the other supervisor came, and I have a heart condition. I sleep with a CPAP. I have high blood pressure. She took her fist of her hand and did it like this and nuzzled me in my chest twice, just as hard as she could. Then she took her fingers and put it under the tender part of my arm and pinched me just as hard as she could. And I kind of glanced up at her, and she told them, she said, "Well, she's all right." She glanced up at me. They said, "Well, how do you want the supervisor?" She said, I'll deal with him." So they took me by the arms and dragged me on the floor, and as they put me in the cell, they took my clothes at the same time. I was on this cold floor with nothing on. There was no pillow. There was no real blanket. There was about 3 little scripts like this in there. There was no chair. There was a little toilet like this and a little basin about this big. And there were things crawling on the floor. There were brown spots on the floor that looked like poop. There was white-looking paint on the floor, and a little tiny window up at the top. And I stayed there, and they came, and I didn't eat anything. I didn't go to the bathroom. I didn't eat anything the whole time I was there. I ate about 2 bites of a little corn dog about this long before I got out. But then I finally went to sleep, and I kept waking up and somebody would walk by and check on me. And the next morning they came, and the lady said, she said, who all wants to take a bath? And when she got to me, she said, well, we know you don't want to take a bath. And she walked on by my cell. So this other lady came, and she says, well, we're seeing the psychiatrist today. She said, you think you want to see the psychiatrist today? And I told her, I said, I haven't had a telephone call. I haven't had anything. Nobody, my family doesn't know where I am or anything. So she went to the next cell and got the lady out of the next cell. And finally, a lady came about 3 hours later, and she came to me and she said, Miss Stevens, she said, they're telling us that you're crazy or you're suicidal. She said, you're not. She said, you're not crazy, are you? I said, no. And I kind of told her how I had ended up there. So then about 2 or 3 hours later, a lady came and said, do you want to go to first appearance? Of course, I had to ask her what was first appearance. I said, I don't even know what first appearance is. And all of this happened to me because of that telephone call at Mid-Florida. And so she explained to me that I would be going to a judge, but when she came, she brought me these clothes to put on, and it was a black outfit, and the top had these flowers caked up on it, and I smelled the crouch, and it was stinking. And I said, ma'am, I'm not putting on those filthy pants next to my vaginal area. I said, I'm just not going to do that. She said, but the only other thing I have is a 3X. And so she went and she got the 3X. I said, if it's clean, I'll put it on. And she got it, and they took me to the court, and the lady told me, she said, they were debating whether or not they were even going to charge you. So when I got to the judge, she said, you had bail of $550. She said you needed to have called somebody to have them to come and set that out. But I found out my husband was already trying to take care of that. So when I went and stood before the judge says to me, he said, Ms. Stevens, he said, we're not going to charge you bail. Your bail has been dropped. All you need to do is go home and call in and wait for your court date. All because I went to Mid-Florida asking for my money. So then I go back to the jail, and he tells me stay 500 feet from the Mid-Florida, don't go out of state, don't get drunk or get high. So when I go back to the jailhouse, they again tell me, we got to take your clothes and you still got to stay in the cell naked. And I was there about 3 or 4 hours before I was dismissed, but in the midst of being there those additional 3 hours, I stood up and looked, and there was a male person in one of the other rooms who apparently had come in to take out the garbage or something. He's standing there gazing at my naked body. And you're talking about embarrassed and humiliated. I was traumatized. I was like, oh my goodness. And he just stood there. He didn't. When I looked at him, he just there. He was standing there, just getting him a good eyeful. And I stepped back out of view into the corner. And finally, they came and they brought me my clothes, and they brought me this outfit I had on, and they took me to the jail, to the sheriff department, and they gave me my clothes to put on, and they said, we can't give you your pocketbook until you exit the building. And as I was getting ready to exit, they said, your husband's called and he's got the information, and they say, but before you walk out of that door, we need to take your mug shot, because they had not done any of that. And at that point, that was when they took my mugshot and had me to fingerprint on the Xerox machine, all because I asked for my money. All of this happened to me.
Unbelievable.
And I left, and then my husband and my daughter picked me up, and my husband took me out, and before we could get back home, there was a call from Mid-Florida on my cell phone that I had missed. There was a call on my husband's phone that he had missed. There was a call on our landline that had been missed, all from Mid-Florida Credit Union. And she said that her name was Valerie Dollison, and she wanted to come out and talk with me about what had happened, because they had looked at the video. And I asked her, I said, how do you know? She said, well, we looked at it, we saw everything that happened, and we know we want to talk to you about the situation. So I said, I haven't been in 500 feet of Mid-Florida. Why do you want to talk to me? She said, well, we want to talk to you. It'll be okay. I just want to come and talk with you. So when she came, she had this white orchid in her hand, and she said, this is for me. She said, this is not for Mid-Florida. And so she said to me, she said, I'm here on behalf of Mid-Florida Credit Union. And she kept emphasizing, I'm here on behalf of Mid-Florida Credit Union. She said, we were wrong. She said, if we had done what we told you we were going to do the day before, you would not have been back at Mid-Florida. I said, you are exactly right. She said, we're trying to understand how you felt and how you're feeling. And she said, the president wants to know how you feel. And I said, if you want to know how I feel, I said, think about the fact that if it was your mama, I said, tell the president to think about the fact if it was his mama,
exactly,
or somebody that they knew and loved or something like that had come in just to ask for their money. I said, that's all I was asking for. She said, well, we were wrong. She said, they sent you this $300 gift card. And I was like, what? She said, a $300 gift card. And she left it on the table. And she said they're paying one, called it a goodwill offering of one house payment for you. And they said, if you need anything, let us know. They said, our attorney is going to take care of everything, that they're going to make this thing wholly disappear, all disappear. And so later, when time came for me to go to court, the court called me and said, they said somebody was trying to take care of what happened to you, but it was a thing where it went against their interests and they couldn't do anything. But they said, anyway, the state attorney's office had just dropped the whole case. So I got to say absolutely nothing. But I was just traumatized. I was humiliated. I was dehumanized, all because I wanted my money that I had placed in a bank that I had been banking with at that time some 47 and a half years. They had financed my house, and to pay my mortgage was what I was trying to do, because they have my house mortgage now. I have a truck financed through them now. And I went through all of that just to, I don't understand. And right now I have a psychiatrist. I've seen my psychiatrist that I've had to pick up since this happened. She said that I'm dealing with post-traumatic stress syndrome. She's got me on 3 meds. She's got me on 2 to help keep me level. She's got me on 1 to help keep the nightmares away. I have a therapist who teaching me all these games and things to help me to deal with this situation when it comes up, because it constantly comes up. And I made the mistake of watching this thing on television the other night where this young man was brutally killed by the police. That thing just went all over me because his hands were handcuffed behind his back. And I shouldn't have watched it, but I went through it all back over again, and I saw my therapist on yesterday. I was with my psychiatrist last week, and it's just more than I can deal with.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens, for bearing your heart.